Alright, we're here this morning to take a look at this guitar that's been in the past 4 or 5 videos. This is a 1990s, I'm not sure the exact year, but it's a 90s HD-28. We did quite a few things to this, and almost all of it was in some video or another. I replaced the tuners here. There was the shallow closed back. I replaced those with open back Waverleys. That's in a video. I did the nut. I didn't do a video on that, but I talked about it. I did a new bone nut because the spacing was a little wonky. The high E was way up on this side. And I replaced 15 frets on it. Took the popsicle brace out. Finished the scallop. And when I say finish the scallop, what I'm talking about is on the HD series. So that's the HD-28, the HD LSV, the HD Vintage, all the HDs. Martin starts the scallop about 1.5 inches away from the X brace. So the brace comes out like this, full height brace, and then it does a scallop and cups up, does the scallop. Whereas on something like an Authentic or a GE or a Marquis or a pre-war, the scallop starts immediately at the X brace and makes a nice smooth arc over under the ends and back. So when I say finish the scallop, what I mean is I go in and cut that 1.5 inches of non-scallop section away, curve it into the brace. So I have a whole video on this. It's called Finishing the Scallop. So go check it out if you're interested in that. Okay, let's see. The reason I do that, I talk about it in the other video, but quickly. The reason I do that is to prevent a stress riser and also make it a little bit more like an authentic, more like a vintage scallop guitar. Someone asked me in a question what a stress riser was. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a place where the stress rises up through a system. So, for instance, if you took a straw and pushed it like this, it would bend pretty evenly, and at some point it's going to collapse, and that point to where it collapses is where the stress riser is. So if you took that straw and you pre-bent it a little bit, put a little, bend it like that, and then start pushing it, it's going to bend, pow, right there exactly at that thing. So that's a weak spot. It's a stress riser. More technically, a stress riser would be someplace where the stress basically rises. So you're putting stress in a brace right here, and it folds up just like a straw does. So when you have a weak spot, you got a strong spot in that brace, and then you got a weaker spot over here where the scallop is short and needs tension. It's going to buckle right here in this little area. So what I see in HD-28's older ones from the 70s and 80s, mostly in the mid 70s, I see a really bad hump right here, and that's because the scalloping doesn't start under here. So I've actually had some success in reducing that belly, or at least smoothing that belly out by finishing the scallop. So that's why I do it. I do it partly for that and partly for the sound. Just does that kind of thing. I shaved the rear back braces on this guitar. The reason I do that is because that's the way the pre-1994 was, and that's why I know this was after 94, is because it has tall back braces. Martin had some trouble with wood cracking on the back, and their solution is always to throw more wood at the problem. So they put tall back braces on there. That results in a back that has an even tap tone. So when you tap down the back on this one, you're going to hear a much deeper woof right here in the middle. Right there. Before I did the shave those braces, a very even tone, and so that results in a more even tone when you're playing. You don't get the complex bass acting on it. That more flexible back also will kick you in the ribs when you're playing, and I like that a lot because I like guitars that are alive, and they move when you play them. You can feel it. So that's a lot. Even if there was no sound difference whatsoever, the way it moves and the vibrations that you feel are a really important part of the playing experience. Okay. Other thing I did on this was to remove the bridge and scrape the finish away underneath it and re-glue it. So what Martin was doing during this time was they would cut a pocket in the finish. So they finished the whole guitar, and then they cut a pocket out of the finish that's smaller than the bridge, and then they just set the bridge right straight down on that and glue it. And a couple of reasons. I know why they did that. We'll talk about that in a second. But what happens is the finish is about 6/1000 to 8/1000 of an inch thick, which if you go back and you watch the neck relief video that I did, that's how much we were playing with on the relief, So 6/1000 of an inch is a measurable amount. You've got to have a finish on the guitar. I'm not criticizing the finish. What I'm saying is that here's the top of the guitar, and the finish sits on top of it, and the finish is 6/1000 of an inch thick. The bridge sits on top of this. So that means that you've got the bridge is sitting on the finish, which first of all, glue doesn't stick to a finish very good. But second of all, then, the glue has to fill this gap right here of 6/1000, 8/1000 of an inch. So your bridge is never sitting on the top wood. It's sitting on a layer of glue. And like I just said, glue does not stick to finish very well. So what'll happen is you get little gaps back in here. You can push a feeler gauge in there and they stop when they hit the glue. But the bridge is not contacting the top fully. So what I do is take the bridge off. Before I do that, I score it. Score around the bridge, take the bridge off, and then scrape all that excess finish off. On this guitar, this was like 1/4 of an inch of finish under here. So scrape that all off, clean it all up, and re-glue the bridge. Now I know why they do that. Well, I think they do that, and that is because when you glue the bridge like that with a score, you can always see the edge of it right here. You can always see just a tiny little bit around here where you can see the score mark, because you can't get it exactly. You got to have a tool to score it with, and that tool that blade has a width, and that's what you see. But I'm used to seeing that because I know how the guitar is put together, and I just know that somebody who's not a guitar nerd walks into some big box store, and they see the Martin guitars up there, and they see this little line over here, and that's horrible, Whereas when they set it on top of the finish, it's a smooth line going under there. And it's just one of those cosmetic things that doesn't make structural sense. Same sort of thing goes on with the braces. A lot of people look at braces like that, and if they see a little bit of glue squeeze out, oh, that's horrible, that's so sloppy. Yeah, maybe, but then they got glue in there. If you see a little bit of squeeze out, all the old vintage Martins and everything had a little bit of glue squeeze out. You can see it. You can see the hot glue shining up in there, and so it just tells you that they got glue in there. When I look at these, I think, what if they put glue in there? I don't see squeeze out. So It's just a cosmetic thing. It's so much better, in my humble opinion, to have that bridge glued directly to the wood. And I know, you still got a layer of glue, but it's still very, very thin. And if you used hide glue or something, it would be no line of glue at all. So anyway, I take the bridge off and do that kind of thing. So, alrighty. I also did a neck reset on this guitar, and if you look at the triage video, a couple of videos back, I had this guitar, I examined it, and I said, gosh, that neck it really could benefit because the heel had a little bit of an air gap for a lot of the heel. The saddle was just so marginal, and I thought, gosh, it could really benefit from a neck reset. The owner emailed me, and he said, do a neck reset on it. So I did, and here's the saddle we got now. Yeah, it's perfect. It's 145, which is on the tall side of perfect. A perfect range would be from 125 to 145. And to me, that's perfect, within that range. 150, 155 would be getting a little bit tall. Still good, but, a little on the tall side. 160 would be getting a little bit tall. 115 would be a little bit too low, especially after a neck reset. If you had 115 to start with, it'd be acceptable. But, 135, I'm really happy with that. Came out perfectly. It's got a nice, good-looking saddle on it. Very consistent break angle. I left the bridge plate alone on this guitar because it's this maple bridge plate. It's not quite as small as the ones I put in, but it's close enough. So, that's the HD-28. The reason we're looking at the HD-28 here, the reason I compared it to the 70's is because they both have the same top woods. They both have the same tuners. The very consistent guitars. They're both Indian rosewood back and sides, Sitka spruce top, popsicle braces gone, Waverly tuners, all that stuff. The 70's has got a long through vintage saddle because I cut that. That might be my entire bridge. I don't remember. That's a small difference. That's a difference. But the main thing that I wanted to compare in these two guitars is the bracing system. The HD over here has fully scalloped bracing, especially now that I finished it. And what I mean by that is the tone bars are scalloped. So you got X braces and you got tone bars. The tone bars are scalloped from the factory. On the 70's, I can also scallop the tone bars, but more and more I have been leaving the tone bars alone because I've been getting great feedback from non-scalloped tone bars. My experience with scalloping braces, I've done this many times where I've done actual experiments where I was even scallop one brace at a time and listen to how the sound would change. And then I'd reverse that process. Scallop this brace first, this brace, combinations of things, because I can always go in and scallop some more. And what I think happens, what I hear happening, when you scallop the X braces, you get the bass on the guitar. You get a deeper tone. It gets rid of the nasally tone that a non-scalloped guitar has. When you do the tone bars, you get the woof. You get the percussion. So when I don't scallop the tone bars on this, you get something that you can't get from Martin. If you want a fully scalloped D-28, there are some available. I mean, you can start with an HD-28, and we can just finish the scallop up, and, it's still a scalloped guitar, right? You could get, like I said, you could get a Marquis, you could get a Golden Era, which is a D18, but you could get a Marquis, you could get an Authentic, you could go buy a pre-war. You got a couple options for fully scalloped guitars. You do not have any option at all for a half scalloped guitar with just the X braces and not the tone bars. So that's why I like to do the 70's like that, because it gives you something that Martin doesn't offer. So, what I mean by the woof is if you when you're playing and you hear this percussion, boom, 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 that's the wolf. The best way to show it, I guess, is maybe tap on the bridge here and listen for that percussion, the push of air. Okay, let's compare the 70s. It's different, you see? It's not as deep. When I hit it, I can feel it, which you can't because you're watching. This one's got a much firmer feel to it, but let's do it again. I'll just shut up so you can listen. Again, I can feel it. So when I hit this one, it's a drum. Boom, 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 boom. When I hit the 70s, it's different. It's a drum, but it's not like a snare drum. It's different feel to me. I feel it when I'm playing rhythm, mostly. And on the HD, I would feel... Again, sitting into my ear, the HD is like playing a more open drum, a bigger drum. Boom, 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 boom. And that one's a tighter sound. Chung, 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 chung. So that's the percussion thing. Like I said, I definitely notice it when I'm playing rhythm, bluegrass rhythm, and hitting the strum. Now, I think, well, woofer is great. Well, woofer is pretty fun. And when you're playing in an acoustic setting, the woof is what makes the banjo player, recoil. You can actually feel the woof coming off of the guitar. But that's bad news on a microphone because it makes the microphone woof out. Boom, boom. And it's harder to mic a guitar that's woofy, especially if you got a guitar that's bassy and woofy. That's a really hard combination to mic. So in the live situation, in front of a microphone or recording on stage or whatever, the woofy bassy guitar is going to be harder to mic. The one that's a little less woofy but still has the bass, but it has less of the percussion, is going to be easier to mic, and it's going to come through the mic better and may end up sounding better. So, well, that's why we're comparing these two. That's why I picked these two out of the pile of guitars to compare, so that you could hear the difference, hopefully, between a fully scalloped and a half scalloped guitar. So that's what we got to talk about, and I'm going to play this guitar a little bit more, and you can see how it sounds, and we'll see you later. Bye.